Hello, 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 everybody, and welcome to MJ Live, the Retire Ready series. Today is going to be an exciting show, so just get ready, guys. We're going to start off as we usually do by playing a little bit of music to give you guys a chance to come on in and a chance to share. All right, guys, so let's go. Let's hear some music as we do every single week. All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in, come on in. Let us share. Welcome. Can you hear the music all right? Welcome, Victor Morgan. You're early today. Good to see ya. Come on in, guys. People like to take their time to come in, but I'm not going to be here long tonight, guys. It's been a while, yes, indeed. Come on, tell a friend, tell a friend. Just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes to come in. I know you're all very, very busy. I appreciate you all. Gary. How you feeling, Victor Morgan? How you doing, Oral Ferguson? Welcome, welcome, guys. All the guys are early tonight. Where the ladies at? Where the girls? Come on in. Come on in, guys. Let's go. Be a good one, guys. We've done our homework, and now we're gonna get the professional in. Bless, bless, yes. Great, says Victor. Hey, Miss B. Vanessa. Welcome. invites, show some love. Awesome to see you. Let's just tell a friend. Just tell one person, guys. Or two. Or three or four or five. Alright, we're gonna get into it now. Let me get my drink. You get some water. Get yourself comfortable, guys. We're gonna get into it tonight. Oh, right. Welcome everybody. Welcome to MJ Live. It's the Retire Ready Research Series where we've been digging into some of the topics of just of life, not even necessarily to do with retirement, but just in life in general. Personal finances, of course, estate planning. We're going to be talking with a certified professional, personal advisor, financial advisor, that's it. And also somebody who helps with funerals and cremations and listen, all of these kind of things that we're maybe just a little bit nervous to talk about, but we're going to talk about them right here. All right, guys? So turn your phones off, get comfortable, turn your phones down, and just tell a friend to get on in here. We're just getting started. We do have an attorney, a estate planning attorney, Marlon Brammer, who's going to be joining us in a short moment. He's right here. He's ready to go. They're down there in the waiting room with his big smile on his face. So we're waiting. We're going to be bringing him up very, very, very soon. But before we do that, let me just go ahead and do a few preliminary things here, as we usually do. Let's we have a big event coming up on October 15th. So I do want to show you this information here. October 15th, the Retire Ready live experience event. It's a live event which basically it's the end of our series. Well, it's not going to be really the end, but it's going to be a pivotal point in our series to do everything live, because we've been doing this every week for the past 2 months or so, and we're going to get together and be in a space together and do a really, really great event. Also, let me just give a big shout out to my VIPs. Where are my VIPs at? So let me just get this down so we don't get any feedback. And we're gonna get. Let us give a shout out to our VIPs. All right, guys. Yes, indeed. Aura says the ladies are still cooking. All right, welcome everybody, and I'm so happy to see you all here. It's not too late to share. We're going to start talking with our professional today, so it's not too late to just tell somebody to get in here. I know that some people are actually watching in the background and they don't put their names in, and that's fine. That's actually fine. Somebody called me up this week and said that they really enjoyed this series, and I do also believe that this series is a really, really important one. So thank you all for joining us, and we're going to get right into it. So right now, it's my pleasure and honor to welcome to the stage, to the show, Mr. Attorney, Attorney Marlon Brammer. Welcome, Marlon. How are you doing today?
Hey MJ, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to sharing. And I was actually enjoying the music in the background there, so I didn't know it was this funky. I wouldn't come this dressed.
No, you're doing. You're fine. You're fine. We like you like this. We
Okay,
want you to we want
okay,
you to show your professional
all right,
suit and everything.
sounds
So
good.
it's absolutely amazing.
Okay,
And
good.
this is a kind of a very sort of relaxed. Even though we're I play music and stuff like that. We're kind of serious and fun at the
Right,
same time.
right.
And it's
It's
kind of
fun. It's fun. I
a
enjoy
very
it.
very interactive group as well. People share their thoughts and comments in the chat room. So I will be bringing up their comments from time to time as we go through.
Mhm.
And also, if people have questions, guys, if you have questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the chats, so we can have Attorney Marlon answer them for you. So before we get right into it, Attorney Marlon, could you just introduce yourself to everybody? Just tell us a little bit about your background and why you got into this field.
Sure. So let me first say greetings to Gary, Revelation Dixon. Thank you for the shout out. I appreciate that. Um, Absolutely. So my journey to estate planning is was never a linear journey, right? So it started out. If you go to my website, there is a post that I did. It literally started out in the 1800s, and you might wonder why. But my family were that we were a part of a legacy of land in a different country, right? That we essentially had for generations, thousands and thousands of acres of land, and to this day, we can't. None of us can actually lay claim to that land, right?
Oh,
So over from that experience was born my journey, right? So, and I wouldn't have known that until maybe I'd say a decade or two ago, right? So I literally went to law school on the premise that I was going to essentially change the financial world because I used to work with a broker dealer in South Florida, and I wanted to be on the regulatory side of things because of some things that I've seen or experienced. So I decided I wanted to be an SEC attorney, and I was going to just take it to the man. And that didn't actually play out because I actually worked for the Florida Department of Financial Services for a little while. Then I went to Atlanta and I worked for the IRS and several law firms. While in Atlanta, my dear sister-in-law passed away at the tender age of 39,
oh,
and it was a sudden death. It was a experience on Father's Day, no less,
right.
in our home. And it struck me at that time that I, practicing in the area of asbestos litigation at the time, decided that I wanted to ensure that these legacies don't get lost, and rekindle my journey with serving the public in the financial services. Therefore, I wanted to redirect my legal practice in that area. So I looked into estate planning. And so, approximately 6 years ago, I decided to redirect my efforts in that effort. So we moved back to South Florida, and we opened the estate planning firm that we do. We practice in the areas of estate planning, business, and real estate. And what we do is we try to protect the assets of individuals, families, and investors all across the state of Florida.
Beautiful. That's a wonderful, interesting story. It goes, you say, it goes quite far back, and
Yeah.
you said, so you weren't actually able to retrieve ownership of the property, the land. Is that correct, or you were?
Right. No. So the this is a cautionary tale in what not to do. Right.
Right.
So this is I remember being a child visiting that plantation. Just kind of going there and having fun the entire days. They're having fun and realizing that the patriarchs and the matriarchs would kind of go off in the corner and kind of have their private discussions, and realizing that these were times that they were discussing very weightier subject matters. And a wink here, a nod here, a handshake there, and here we are today, right? So
Wow.
it's important for us to ensure that we are doing things in the open, and we're
Hmm.
doing things clearly, so that we can pass it on from generation to the next.
Excellent. Now, and this is why we're here today, because I don't know about you if you experience this, but is this a topic that is like openly discussed as far as wills and trust and property being handed down? What's going to happen when you pass away? Or is it in your experience, is it a topic that people are a little bit nervous or scared, or it's just not talked about?
So all of the above. So this is the one discussion that I find that a lot of families find it difficult to bring themselves to talk about. In fact, it's the one discussion that should not be missed at the dinner table, right?
Mm,
What's going to happen? We know that we are not here forever, right? And we know what we're working for, right? We're literally working to ensure that the next generation is taken care of. When I think about the work that I have to complete, I'm not necessarily thinking about how it's going to ingratiate myself, but necessarily benefit my children, right? And
yeah.
my children's children. Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. So our very the very efforts of us, of our work and our ingenuity is to ensure that not just our present needs are taken care of, but the needs of others beyond our sphere and control. And I find that this is usually the topic that tends to be missed. And by the way, in my estimation, this is where a lot of wealth is lost. We know
Ah,
how to create wealth. We know how to get the jobs, open businesses, become millionaires or billionaires. But a lot of the time, due to poor planning, we don't know how to transfer that wealth to the next generation. And wealth doesn't necessarily have to be in the terms of assets and money. It could be very well your ingenuity, the information that you want me to pass on to ensure that the family business is ran properly. There's an old proverb that the wealth is usually created in the first generation, and by the third generation, it's lost.
wow, wow. So really, really, the question is, why is it? Why is it that people hesitate to talk about these things? Do you know?
It's a myriad of reasons. It could be anything from just the actual fear. I've heard people saying that, you know what, I don't want to talk about life insurance because if I do, then I'm going to die, right? So it could be some old wives' tale. It could stem from just the lack of knowledge, the lack of experience, the lack of exposure to this area of planning, which is critical,
Mm-hmm.
a critical area. I know stories where in Atlanta, and I'm pretty sure in other inner cities, where individuals will literally go and knock on the doors of the inner city community and offer them $40,000 for a home, and they'll accept it, right? That's called gentrification, right? So
Oh,
we can no longer go in those communities and purchase those homes because they're far out of reach. But had we the foresight to think that if you're offering me $40,000 for this home, then it must be worth more, or there must be something afoot that I need to be aware of,
mm,
and that comes with, again, with proper planning. One of the excuses I get is I don't have anything
mm,
to pass on, right?
mm-hmm.
And that house that you thought was only worth $40,000 is a significant sum now.
All right, so we're going to get into some of the questions and thoughts. Gary says, I lost my brother a year today, and this was an issue. So, Gary, are you saying that your brother did not have a will in place, did not have a trust in place? I'm going to assume that's what you're saying, but you can elaborate a little bit more if you choose. Um, welcome, Paula Scott. Good to have you with us as well. Paula Scott says, Marlon Brammer. I know some notable Brammers in Clarendon.
Yeah, that's probably us. Yes, that's where we hail from. Maypen all the way up to I went to Knox in borders Clarendon and Manchester. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So let's get into some of the nitty gritties. We're talking about wills and trust, and most people know about what I'm doing here as far as bringing some of these topics to the front. And and it's a research project. So I started to dig around and do a will. And as I started to do a will, I started to question. I think maybe it's possible that I may even need a trust. So the first part of it is the will. Could you just define for us what is a will?
So, a will is a document that expresses your intent as far as what your bounty is concerned. It is a document that expresses your wishes that certain assets would be passed to certain individuals in a certain manner, right? And that's all it is. It's a wish. It's a
Mm-hmm.
desire that the house would go to my daughter, the car would go to my son, and the business would go to whomever, right? So it's a desire, and it should be honored at your passing.
So is it as simple as that though? If you have a will and you pass away, these things happen, or does it go to probate? And if you could explain what probate is.
Right. So you did your research, yes. So it's not as easy as that, right? So that's where it starts. I always tell folks that it's the less expensive option of the two, right? But it's the most expensive document that you'll ever create. In fact, you can literally get a will document by going to the library or downloading it off of a website, and that would be quote unquote free to you, but to your heirs and your beneficiaries, the will would absolutely need to be probated, right? And I caveat that with if there are certain assets that are included in those wishes, which needs to be transferred by you and only you at the time of your passing, presents a problem. You're no longer here, and let's think about the situation of a deed or a house. If you're no longer here to sign that deed and pass it on to your son as you wished it would have done, then there needs to be a substitute for that process. The process is called probate. And
Okay.
we're going to use that will, we're going to actually take that will to the court and go through the probate proceeding and then ensure that a representative is appointed to act on your wishes, right? We want to make sure that there's someone there who's appointed by the court, supervised by the court, that would ensure that your wishes are carried out the way that you intended them to be. The problem with that is the probate proceeding is designed for creditors. So if you are in a situation where you have credit card debt, you might have a mortgage, you might have student loan at your passing, or if you may have never had any of the above, but unfortunately during the process you went through the hospital, and that hospital bill is now come due at your passing, and they're going to ensure that all those bills are paid for. And as a result, your wishes may not necessarily be honored because we're going to have to liquidate some of those assets to ensure that those bills are paid for. And obviously, they're done in a statutorily they're done in a order of priority. So certain assets, certain creditors, I'm sorry, will be satisfied before others are. Right, but you're going to have a line of creditors that you're going to have to make sure that that is taken care of. So that's what a will does. It exposes your assets. It's public. It's expensive. I always remind people that Chadwick Boseman, he had a 900 million dollar bill. Yeah, 900,000, no, $900,000 bill. I'm sorry, for just the probate proceeding. Right. So luckily, his wife and his heirs walked away, I think, with $1.8 million. Right, but $900,000 can change someone's life, and it's inexpensive. It's public because we have to hail all these creditors into court to ensure that they're taken care of.
And it takes a long time as well, right?
It's very time intensive. So
Yeah.
on average, anywhere from 9 months to a year, sometimes 2 years, and if you're in a serious proceeding, maybe even longer than that.
So you said that the credit there's like an order that the creditors will receive the whatever that is owed to them. Can you just
Sure.
talk about what order it usually goes in?
So funeral expenses is first, right? That's
Okay.
that's the priority. We want to make sure that that is taken care of,
Uh huh.
and the estate would essentially reimburse whoever spent for those expenses. So that's the first creditor. The
Okay.
second is attorney's fees and costs. So that's going to be paid for upfront
Uh huh.
or out of the estate. The other creditors are priority creditors, such as the state who may have paid for that medical bill. If you have an IRS bill, a tax bill, any of those, if you have, let's say, for example, child enforcement cases that needs to be paid for, that's going to take a priority. And then next we're looking at, let's say, the mortgage. We're looking at the mortgage. We're looking at credit cards. We're looking at all other loans. But that's a typical in the state of Florida. That's a priority. Funeral expenses, attorney's fees, um, federal claims, as well as state claims, and then anything beyond that would be mortgages, credit cards, and the like.
Excellent. Good to know. Good to know. Hadn't touched that in my research.
Yeah.
Let's go to a couple of questions that we have here. Should you currently add your kids on the on your deed?
All right. So that's a common question I get, and I can understand why you do that. In fact, I had a client who is near death, and we just don't have any time to get a trust done properly, and that's one of the recommendations that I proffered. However, that's not a long-term strategy. That's not something that you should be doing as a planning mechanism. I only refer them to that process by simply ensuring that we have a couple of weeks left with this person, so let's get that done so we can ensure that the property passes. However, you're making up quite a few assumptions if you put your child or someone else on the property. First, you're assuming that that child won't pass before you do, right? So that there's a risk that that child might pass before you do, and now you're back to square one. The other challenge is once you do that, you're creating what we call a joint tenancy in common. A tenancy in common can be it, broken up in any proceeding. So, for example, if your child is in a situation that they're being sued, that they have a creditor situation, maybe a credit card debt, or um, some situation that there might be a car accident that they're being sued for, that person can attach to the interest in that property and separate or force the sale of that property. There's a whole industry centered around this. I've had clients who were almost rendered homeless primarily because they were in a joint tenancy. And the person who was no longer interested in being in that joint tenancy, they sold that interest to a corporation. And the corporation wasn't interested in moving in with that client, right? They want their profit out of the home. So they're forcing the sale of that home, rendering my client either in a situation where she has to refinance or is going to be homeless, right?
Yeah.
So that's not an ideal situation that you want to be in. There's, like I said, there's a whole industry of attorneys lined up to dismantle these tenancies in common. Um, the best strategy is to look to possibly doing a trust.
Okay, let me just give a few more shout outs to people that have just come in. Welcome everybody. It's so good to have you all with us. Shout out to everybody that I shouted out before, but also Jacqueline Adamson. Welcome, welcome. She has a question. We're going to come to that in 1 second. And also shout out to Debt Free Dad. Hey 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 family, and I really really appreciate you for joining us tonight. He's also an attorney as well, and he's doing a series of really amazing financial
Good.
topics, and
That's
I
awesome.
believe you're
We
going to
need
be
to
also
connect.
speaking with you're going to be speaking with um, JT. Oh my gosh, I call his name every single time I do my show, and it's gone out of my mind right now. Drop it in for me, Jeffrey Dead. I know you're going to be talking to JT very very soon. And also a big shout out to I'm listening. Good to have you with us as well. And let's see, great info says Paula Scott. These are real life issues that we see every day. Thank you for the information. It's my absolute honor. Let us also go to Debt Free Dad. Thanks for your insight. I'm an attorney and this is not my area of operation. LOL. Is there a nuance to trust when it relates to what is it? I'm not
Special
sure.
needs.
To special
Special
needs
needs.
children. We're going to come to that in a little bit. Debt-free dad. We're going to take the questions as they come through. So, pocket watch it. That's it. Pocket watch with JT. I watch him every time, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Really, really great information, and I know you're doing a collaboration with him soon. All right, so let's go back to the questions from how they came in. I'm going to take them as they came in. Um, Jackie asks, "What is a ladybird deed?"
So a ladybird deed is what we call a life estate deed, right? It just provides the owner of the home, the person who holds the deed, the opportunity to grant a life estate to whomever, right? So you can literally say, you know what, I'm going to provide a life estate for my son or my daughter, right? They are not going to be disturbed while at that home, and it's a deed that can be registered, and it's one way of trying to avoid probate as well, right? It's akin, I think, akin to put your child on the deed, right? You're putting a living, breathing person who possibly can die, right? And that's one of the risks involved with a ladybird deed, as well as making sure that you put someone else on as a joint tenant. It does, it's a step up from the tenancy in common, but it certainly still has its flaws.
Excellent, excellent. And everybody here, we're talking with attorney Marlon Brammer, right here in South Florida. And as you can see, he knows his stuff here, guys. So we really appreciate him for being here with us. Should you add your did we already ask that one?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, you put that in twice there. Oh well, let's see. What else did we have? Ba, 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 ba. So debt free dad says, yeah, this is regarding special needs kids, children.
Right. So with a special needs child, one of the concerns with special needs is we have these children who may have federal benefits, right? And there's a concern that if we transfer assets to them, let's say in a trust, that's a regular revocable trust, then that those assets can be counted against that child and thereby reduce their benefits. So what we're going to have to do is create what we call a special needs trust, and that's an exception carved out by the IRS, the code, that ensures that we can pass certain assets on to, it's now a irrevocable trust that can be passed on to that child specifically for the support. It cannot supplant or disturb anything that the federal government is already providing for the child, right? It's just acting as a supplement for whatever support you want to provide. It's a very good way to ensure, let's say, for example, you have I have clients who have kids who are in the hospice, right? They might live a little bit longer than their parents because their parents are older, so they want to ensure that these assets are there for their care and not necessarily disturb what they're getting from the federal government. So we're going to use a special needs trust in that case.
All right, thank you for that. Gary asks, or tells us, my late brother had a will, but nothing planned for his passing. Um, what's your best advice
Okay,
in this
so
situation?
so it all depends on what your late brother had at his passing. All right. I'm not sure if he owned real estate. I'm not sure if he had bank accounts, investment accounts. These are assets that may or may not be able to be transferred without the probate process. So I'd probably need a little bit more information to give you what my best advice is.
Okay, so typically when people say to you, attorney Marlon, that they don't have, I don't have anything to put into a will or a trust. What is your typical answer to them?
I think I sat with a client today, and this person literally used that refrain, and after doing a little bit of probe, he had some assets, right? So I think that when we talk in the parlance of a trust, we tend to we tend to have certain biases attached to that, right? We might have that term trust baby being flown around. and thinking that only wealthy folks should have a trust, right? When in fact that's 100% not true. In fact, the folks in the middle class and below are the ones who need it the most, right? Why is that important? It's important because in the middle class, the most expensive investment we're ever going to make in our lifetime is our home,
Is a home.
and that is something that can be passed on from generation to generation. I know of folks who live close by the former Joe Robbie Stadium, right? And their houses were considered nothing at the time, right? But now that that stadium has become very popular, Miami Gardens has been investing in that area. They're getting offers in the millions of dollars, right, for these homes, right?
Okay.
So we can't just discredit everything that we're doing with folks. And I have clients who veer with a large amount of assets, and I have people who literally are working a regular job, let's say at Publix, right? And they know that they see the vision that they're going to have to secure a trust, right? Because they're planning on purchasing property, they're planning on moving ahead with their lives. So when people say that to me, I try to let them think a little bit more, a little bit deeper into to what they're doing, even if they truly don't own a home. Let's say, what do you plan on doing with your life beyond today, right? What do you plan on and trying to acquire over time? And we talk about that, and we see that it's important that we plan before these things happen.
Okay, so what would you say then is the main difference between a will and a trust?
So the major difference is one passes through probate and one bypasses probate. So the will has to go through probate depending on the assets that you own, right? And the trust doesn't go through probate. It's a private contract between you and this entity that ensures that the entity is going to be responsible for holding or repositioning your assets, thereby ensuring that when I pass, I really don't own anything, right? I own nothing, but I'm controlling everything. And at my passing, there is no need for me to wake up and sign a deed or magically ensure that certain assets are transferred. It's all there. It was always there before I passed. So that's a major difference between a will and a trust. They basically function the same in the sense that we're trying to ensure that your assets are passing to the people that you want to do it in the way that you want to do it.
All right, so this actually leads to this question from Paula. This may be a silly question. Can a trust be contested?
Absolutely, right?
It can.
Absolutely. Where there's ink on a paper, it can be contested, right? So it does not mean that you're going to win. I always tell people that the tie on my neck, you can sue me for it, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that you're going to win that case. Um, but yeah, absolutely. We've seen trust being challenged. Let's say that the person was contemplating hiding assets, purposely hiding assets in anticipation for some sort of litigation. Absolutely. I'm going to be the first attorney to challenge that trust. The intent behind creating the trust was to hide those assets, right? So no, yeah, you can challenge. Anything can be challenged, but it doesn't mean that they're going to win.
Okay, thank you for that one. Welcome to Faye Holder Welsh, who is tuning in from London, as well as Gary is also tuning in from London. So welcome to you guys who are dedicated to stay up with me. So thankful. Hey! MJ missed my alarm call. Woke up and been tuned in from approximate. Just after 1 a.m.
1 a.m.
BST.
Wow,
Splashed water on my face to stay alert. Thank you so much,
that's
Faye.
dedication.
I know, right? I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, can I put my assets in a trust for my dependent? And question two, would she incur inheritance tax? Thanks for sharing this vital information, Attorney Brammer.
Okay. So I'm not sure which jurisdiction we're talking about, right?
Well,
But
she's actually in the UK, but
uh,
give the information regarding
Right.
Florida, but she'll have to just obviously
Right.
speak to
Right. So yeah,
an
I can
attorney
only
in the
speak
UK.
for Florida, right?
Yeah.
But it depends. Depends on which assets are we talking about, right? So the answer to the first question, yes, you can put your assets in a trust for your dependents. The answer to the second question is, will you incur an inheritance tax? No, because we are looking at a situation where the property is already titled in the name of the trust. Upon the time of passing, right? The Let's say you purchased that home for $40,000 30 years ago, and now the house is worth $400,000, right? So you personally would be responsible for the capital gains on that tax on the house. However, when you pass, at the time of your passing, your beneficiaries they receive that asset with that with the current tax basis, not the former tax basis. So they literally have that tax basis at $400,000, and anything above $400,000 they'll be responsible for, as far as taxes are concerned. And an inheritance tax isn't uh, triggered until approximately you're in the $14 million range in the state of Florida.
Okay. All right. Cool. 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 Um, let's see. Debt Free Dad says pocket watching with JT. Yes, definitely. He's not on the show, but he gave me some advice that I will analyze and include the footage from our discussion when I called into his show. Yes, Debt Free Dad, you always call it into his show, so it's always good to hear you. I recognize your voice now all the time now. We just sort of diverted a little bit. Veronica Flowers, hey Veronica, it's Ronnie. Hey Ronnie, welcome to the show. It's been a long time. I know that it's good to have you. I'm going to remember everything in a little bit. It'll come back to me. Um, Visionaries Secure Trusts. What does that mean?
Well, I assume she's saying that if you're creating a trust, then you have good vision, right?
Oh, right, right, right.
I
Oh,
would
yes,
agree
yes,
with you. Yeah, I would agree with
yes,
you.
yes, yes. Okay, Victor Morgan. What if you have a will and name someone, say a child, as an executor? Will there still be a need for probate?
Probate. Right. So yes, it depends on the asset that we're talking about. Now, if we're talking about, um, well, first of all, let's talk about the issue of the child. Right. A child cannot be an executor. Right. So we have to have someone who is 18 years or older to be the executor in the state of Florida. Now, with regard to the asset being probated, it depends on whether or not I'm passing my tie over, right? And maybe even my bicycle over, right? As opposed to a home. A home is usually where we're at. A bank account, a investment account, so on and so forth. These assets needs to be transferred by the individual, the decedent. And without the decedent being here, then we're looking at trying to find a substitute for that specific transaction required by statute. And therefore, we're going to have to probate those assets or put them through the probate proceeding. But if we're talking about um, stuff that can be just handed over without the need of a formal transaction, then yes, you should be okay with it.
All right, so Paul is having a little giggle at your joke there. Wake up at your passage to sign a deed.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that one.
Oh yeah.
It's a dry
Um,
joke.
Glad to be here. Good to have you. My mind is gone. I'm trying to think of something there. So second asset example, house in a trust. So my dependent would not incur inheritance tax. Does that make sense, attorney?
Right. So if the asset is in a trust, they receive that house at the current capital gains, at the current tax basis, right? So or cost basis, I should say. So the cost basis that you purchased that home was for $40,000. So you personally are on the hook for the gains from $40,000 to $400,000, right? But because at the time of your passing, the house was valued at $400,000, your heirs are not responsible for that capital gains. However, if they hold that property and it goes to $4 million, they would be responsible for the gains. If they sold that property the following day for $400,000, they wouldn't be paying any taxes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. Yes, indeed. Hit the like button, guys. There's a few people in here, but I only have like 6 likes. Come on, guys. It's free. It's free to hit that like button. So thank you, Debt Free Dad, moderating for me. Thank you so much. Hit the like button, and also go ahead and share. We're not quite finished yet. Attorney, how much time do we have with you? Have we
I'm
got?
here. I'm here. As long as you need me.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So Faye said she will definitely check the jurisdiction in London.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, I have a couple more questions. Is there ever a need for not having a trust and just relying on the will? For example, if you put your beneficiaries on all of your accounts,
Hmm.
can you get away without having a trust, or will it still, let's say for example, let's say for argument's sake, you put all of your beneficiaries on the car, on all of your accounts, your um, investments, and all of that, and also you did not have any creditors to pay except for the funeral, and that funeral was paid ahead of time. Is there any, is there any a chance that you could get away without having it?
There is a chance. Yes, absolutely. Right. So the and there are the question I'd ask: Are there chances for that to blow up? Absolutely. Yeah.
Blow up in your face, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because again, it, I think I addressed this earlier on. If you put a living, breathing person on your accounts, your custodian accounts, your deeds, so on and so forth, that living, breathing person can die, right? And that living, breathing person can be sued, and that living, breathing person can turn against you in a certain situation and decide that they're going to act in a certain way, right? So to avoid all of that risk, we're going to put a person who's not living or breathing. It's called a trust, right? In those
Okay.
situations. So yeah, people do it all the time, and they get away with it. But that doesn't mean that it's the best way to plan. I've seen usually I'm the one that's being called when it doesn't work,
You're
right?
the one you're the one who gets called to clean up all the mess, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've seen it.
Okay. Um, Again, guys, we're talking with attorney Marlon Brammer right here in South Florida. Um, Very knowledgeable about all things wills, trusts, and estate planning. Um, I'm going to go to my notes at this time to see if there's anything that I have not spoke about. Let's see. Is there anything else in any other questions in here? Feel free, guys, to ask any other questions that you might have. Can you talk about trust a little bit more then? So,
Mhm.
what is the process as far as you have the the executor of the trust and all of these different things? Can you just talk a little bit about how it's structured?
Sure. So when we create a trust, there are three parties that come together to create a trust. We have the trustor, we have the trustee, and we have the beneficiary. So the trustor is the person who is the one who's going to bring the assets to the table. They're the one that's going to ensure that the house is transferred, the bank accounts are transferred, and the trust is funded with these assets. The trustee is the one that's going to be managing these assets. They're going to make sure that the roof is okay. They're going to make sure that the bank account grows. They're going to make sure that everything is ran properly. The beneficiary, obviously, is the one who's going to be benefiting from the work of the trustee. At the creation of the trust, you typically are all three of these people. And you have the option, obviously, of separating yourself even further by having a professional trustee, act on your behalf, depending on the size of your assets. Or you might decide to ensure that we have successor trustees. So we're always going to appoint successor trustees because at some point in time, you're going to either be incapacitated or you're going to be passing on. And that would simply mean that the successor trustee would assume the roles and responsibilities assigned to them in that specific trust, and they would ensure that the your wishes are carried out based upon that. And again, that could be a professional trustee that you hire, or it could be a trustworthy person, your spouse, a child, an aunt, a mom, whatever the circumstances are. And so we don't necessarily have an executor per se, but we have trustees that would essentially manage the trust.
Okay, so that's how it's it's structured. Um, Now I understand there are quite a lot of different types of trusts.
Sure.
And could you explain the difference between a irrevocable trust and a revocable trust, and the different types of trusts that are out there as well?
So the irrevocable trust, there are two main types of trust. There's irrevocable or revocable. The typical trust that you're gonna see out there or someone's gonna secure is a revocable trust, meaning you can always change it, modify it. You still have some flexibility and control over the trust. In fact, you can actually revoke it altogether, right? An irrevocable trust, which has a lot more diversity than, let's say, a revocable trust, um, is irrevocable. It cannot be changed. It has to ensure you have to ensure that it accomplishes the purpose that it was created for. Now, within the world of so the question then begets, why would you essentially have a trust that you can't revoke, right?
Right.
Why would you want to have some control over it? Well, there are specific reasons for that, right? I mentioned one earlier on. We talked about a special needs trust. The government is interested in knowing that you, as the person who created the trust, are not treating this trust as some sort of gimmick or piggy bank that you've created for your child. So we're essentially going to assign certain assets to that specific trust, and we're going to take our hands off of those assets. We're going to make sure that it accomplishes what it was designed for. So there are really good reasons to have an irrevocable trust. That's one example. Another example could be for tax purposes, right? We have a lot of tax planning that can be done in certain trusts, right? Um, and it varies. And depending on how you treat the trust, you can create different types of trust beyond just the revocable and the irrevocable trust.
Hmm. Interesting. For tax
Hmm.
planning purposes as well.
Sure.
Okay. Um, so when I was doing my research, I discovered a lot of different types of trust. The credit shelter trust, the generation skipping trust,
Yep.
qualified personal resistant trust, and all of that kind of stuff. So
Right.
when do they come into part, or you know, is it? Because I've heard about them, but I've never actually heard anybody talk about them.
Right. So the purpose for those trusts in the design session when we sit down and we talk, we try to identify specifically how you want your assets to pass, right? Do you want your assets to skip a generation, right? Is there a reason for that?
Mm.
Is there a reason to provide support for a spouse, right? So we might look at a Q-tip trust, a qualified tax trust, right? We might look
Uh
at
huh.
it at a CRT, a charitable remainder trust, if you're trying
Right.
to essentially transfer real estate to a certain asset and trying to a certain trust and trying to make sure that you can walk away with some favorable tax benefits from that specific transaction. You might look at an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust, that might create a income for the entirety of your life and generations to come. You might even look at a dynasty trust, right? So these are the different, and that's just to mention a few. I could go on and bore
Right.
you
Right.
with these
So
details.
when the client talks with you, you both kind of discover what is the best trust for the person, depending on what they say they want to achieve. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely, that's
Beautiful,
absolutely.
beautiful. That's yeah. Go ahead.
And that's usually, for assets who, I mean, clients who have certain types of assets, and they have a certain goal that they're trying to accomplish, and they might have a certain discriminating way of dealing with those assets,
Uh-huh.
and you might have a charitable purpose, right? So we want to
Right.
make sure that you are trying to accomplish these goals over time. You might have a need to, you might have so much assets that you will need to participate in a charity or maybe even create one, right? So there are a myriad amount of trust that you can actually have trust that owns corporations, right? And ensure that the trust carries out the wishes of the owners in a certain way. In fact, we had a good example of that where this a billionaire just a week ago, he essentially transferred his entire corporation to a trust and dedicated it to the environment, right? So that trust was essentially running the corporation in consideration of the environmental concerns, right? So there's so many different ways of using a trust. It's
Thank you for that.
endless.
We have a question. We have a question from Debt-Free Dad.
Hmm.
Do people with trust tend to include their life insurance policy inside the trust or outside of the trust? Why would a person choose to include or exclude the life insurance policy?
So very good question. So the life insurance is a huge component of a trust. I would refer anyone to study the wealth creation process of the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, right? They essentially used that product to essentially um, secure their wealth for generations to come, right? And that is, wealth that cannot be moved or changed or modified, primarily because they've used life insurance as a centerpiece of their trust building. And yes, absolutely. You can. What I refer, what I recommend to my clients is to ensure that the beneficiary of your life insurance is the trust, right? Because again, I'm assuming that my son is going to be alive at the time of my passing, so I put him down as a beneficiary, right? Why not simply ensure that the funds go to the trust, and then I can determine from inside the trust how those funds will support him if he's still alive, or let's say he isn't in the best situation. He might not be in the most ideal marriage. He might be a drug addict, right? And I just sent him $1 million to support his habit, right? He might be in a situation where he is in a debtor creditor situation, right? And we don't want to just hand over $1 million to a creditor.
Mm.
So there are tons of uses for life insurance. Um, I would also refer you to the family banking principle. We can literally use the life insurance policy as a bank, as a source of borrowing and lending, not only for you, but for the general public. There are some people who actually use their trust and their life insurance policy to create a economy, so to speak, right, where they can actually lend for mortgages, they can lend for a car loan or whatever the situation is. um, they're they're using these products to great effect. I mean, I can geek out on this thing and really get into it with you because this is really what I'm passionate about. But I
No,
I, I really hope that my community kind of wakes up and see the power of using these two tools together.
well, and I'm glad you said that because the wealthy are using these type of vehicles to keep wealth in their family, right? In their generation for generations to come,
Absolutely.
and it's like why aren't we using it? Why aren't our community using these? And that's kind of a rhetorical question, but I don't know. You may have an answer. Why aren't we using these type of vehicles for our benefit?
That is $1 million question. So it goes back to this my origin story, right? It's a lack of exposure, taboo, and just general lack of knowledge and exposure. So I would proffer that more and more people are coming to that understanding, and they're realizing that they need to do it and overcome those generational biases and move forward. But I'm out there. I'm trying to educate. I'm trying to raise awareness and open the doors for more folks.
Yeah, excellent. And we're going to talk about what you're doing specifically in a little bit. Once we
Mhm.
get to the end, we'll let
Sure.
you talk about your workshops and so forth. Definitely, Dad and Millissa Jayne, aka MJ. I already hit the like button and I've shared MJ's link before the show started. Sharing is caring. Thank you so much, there, Faye. Thank you so much. And also, Paula Scott, what's the average cost for a revocable middle class person's trust?
So the average cost, if you should go to certain shops, it varies. It really does. It depends on the level of service that is being provided. You can absolutely go to a mill shop and you can get it for $1,000 or less, right? This is a form that you could download. You can just punch in your name and get it done, right? But on average, an attorney or a law firm would charge approximately around $5,000 to $6,000 for that service. So it really does vary depending on the level of service that's being provided. If we're talking about this document creation and here it is signed, we're looking at the lower end. But if we're talking about a lifetime commitment to that client, we're looking on the higher end.
Thank you for that. Faye says golden nuggets of information shared for my family and loved ones in the US. Definitely, we're here to share this information. We need to get into the habit of just talking about this like naturally, just at your monthly budget call,
Agreed.
family budget, you know, meetings, whatever. Wow, we have truly been in the dark about all these matters. Talk about creating a legacy. This is crucial, right, Paula Scott? Absolutely.
Right.
Daniel Lewis, welcome. Also in the UK, Daniel Lewis Limited, no less. Hi, are the trusts originally from England, and can you put your limited company in a trust? So he's also in the UK.
Yes, I love this question. So it originated from the crown, right? So this
Oh,
is a good origination story that I love to share. So when we were sent off to war, right, there are two possibilities. We're either gonna come home or we're not, all right? And what would happen to a landowner who went off to war and died is that that property would escape to the crown. Crown would then own that property.
oh,
So what would happen is that person they got wise over time and they decided that before I go to war, I'm going to leave my land in trust to MJ. I'm going to make sure that she holds that property. She's not going to go to war, right? And when I come back, she's going to sign that property back to me, right? Just in case I die, she's left with certain instructions
interesting.
to ensure that my children are taken care of and so on and so forth, right? So that's kind of the origin story of a trust. It's a very old law, a very old principle, and you can use it to great effect. And let me just add to what you just said with regard to being able to speak these things naturally. I think it has to become second nature.
Yeah,
Has to be something that is discussed at the dinner table, often at the dinner table, and that's one of the tales that I try to caution folks when I share them that my journey started in the 1800s, right? Primarily because this wasn't a discussion that was done at our dinner table. It wasn't something that a young child should be talking to an adult about, right?
right,
But
right.
if at least there was some oral discussion or some oral history that was being passed on, would have some context to which we could defend certain assets.
Right. Okay, so Debt Free Dad says, "Oh, that makes sense. I'll stick with financial crimes and the False Claims Act. This sounds complicated and likely has a lot of emotions involved. I'm gonna leave it to you counselor."
No,
From
well,
one attorney to another.
yeah, well, Financial Crimes and False Claims Act. That's kind of where I was heading with the SEC, right? It didn't work out, so I'll cede ground to you there as well.
I love that counselor talk. This that the legalese, as they say. um, Paula Scott. They don't teach these things in schools. So sad. You know what though? I've stopped. I've stopped. I've kind of stopped saying that now because yes, they don't teach these type of things in school, just like they don't teach financial literacy in school. But I made it a point, at least for the financial literacy part, to educate myself on all things. Getting out of debt, making sure I never pay a penny of interest, and all of these things. House paid off, car paid off, all of those things. I like to let people know that it's possible. But
Hmm.
and the information is out there. The information is out there to be searched, and especially now with the internet, with the blogs, with the YouTube, with the podcast. When During this research project, the amount of information that I'm finding, it's just out there for the taking. But there are certain areas where we have to call it a pro. That's why we brought in attorney Marlon Brammer today, because there are some areas that are so complicated, so detailed, so all these different nuances, and you have to get the experts to come in on some of this stuff. Um, I know you agree to that, attorney.
I do.
Definitely does says a lot of people are scared to discuss their demise. I know. I think we might have to bring in a therapist at the end of this. My father, my father was so grouchy when he was doing his will. I was like, dude, I'm
Ooh.
I'm good. Don't leave me anything, cause
Right,
you're annoying.
right, right.
But I love you. So
Right.
yeah.
So that's kind of where the discussions tend to go, right? Dad, let's talk about what's going to happen to the house after you pass. Are you trying to kill me, right? What you why are you talking about dividing my stuff while I'm still living, right? So it's a wonderful thing actually to think that you are just this eternal being and there's nothing that's going to happen, right? But if we are realists and pragmatists, we're going to realize that we have to prepare, right? Just as how you prepared for that college exam and you prepared for that job interview, you're gonna have to prepare for this big event, right? And
Mm,
when
yeah.
I look in my daughter's eyes and my kids' eyes, I don't want to burden them with anything that I can control right now, right? And that's the whole. That's I think that's how that discussion should be had. Um, I,
Yeah.
I I don't want to be burdened with the challenges that might be laid ahead. So, while I might not be interested in necessarily participating in dividing your assets, it's a discussion that we need to have. If you're gonna donate to charity, then so be it. Let's make sure that that is done. But I don't want to be in a situation where we are looking at having to deal with that without you not being here.
Here's another question from Paula Scott. Looking forward to hearing more. I will share. Oh, it's not a question. I will share with my contacts, parents, community. Thanks again. Thank you so much, Paula Scott. Thank you so much. Here's the question. Victor Morgan, what of the beneficiaries have your password to all your assets? Couldn't they utilize those assets? What if, is that supposed to be if? I think,
What
yeah, it's
if?
supposed to
Yeah.
be if. What if the beneficiaries have your passwords to all your assets? Couldn't they utilize those assets? Good question.
So, practically speaking, yes, sure, they could potentially utilize those assets. If we're going to have to probate those assets, however, right, we're going to have to make sure that those assets are frozen so that we're not necessarily using it as a piggy bank or a chest that we're just going to raid because, again, there might be some debts that need to be paid. Um, So yeah, practically speaking, you can have leave access to certain people and ensure that certain bills or directions are taken care of. But try to make sure that those assets don't end up in probate court, because then it's going to be scrutinized.
So, for example, let's say I gave my husband access to all of my, all of our bank accounts, right? And I passed away, and so he would be able to, let's say, transfer all the money into into some other different account
Mhm.
before the courts got to it. Is that possible?
Right. So in your case, ideally speaking, if you're married, I'm not gonna presume I know your situation, but a typical couple, married couple, they'd hold an asset like a bank account in joint tenancy, right? So joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So that asset would have passed on to your husband. Now, if you simply left your password for him, he could certainly go ahead and transfer, without them knowing, right? But at some point in time, right, we're gonna talk about what assets did you own at your passing, because he's gonna eventually have to bring that death certificate to the bank and say, hey, she died on the 15th, right? Okay. So who was transferring all of these assets on the 20th? See the problem?
Yeah.
So
We're just
yeah,
trying to think out of the box here.
yeah, there's an audit trail that usually catches up with you. So want to make
Okay.
sure that we're doing these things in the proper way.
Okay. Okay. So this is what Paul says. That's why it's called trust. Make sure you trust the person,
Yeah.
entity representing you. You're right.
That is true. And Paula, I need to know if you're from Clarendon as well.
She probably is.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So, question 4 from Faye. Isn't it true to say if there are outstanding debts to be paid after death during probate, uh, CHK checks? I don't know. The government and or debtors cannot touch what is left in a trust, right?
Right. So yeah, so a trust avoids the court altogether, right? So we aren't going to question who owns this house, right? Because we already know that the trust did, and we already have designated a successor trustee, and that successor trustee is doing the work that they were charged to do, right? So we're not even in court in this specific situation, right? It's because we're in a trust, the assets are placed in a trust, and there is no need to involve the court, because it's similar to an LLC. If an LLC owned the property and you just happen to be the owner of the LLC and you passed, the LLC still owns the property, right? So we're not concerned about taking this asset to probate court, because the owner of the property was the trust.
Got you. Okay, we're wrapping that. We're coming down to the last few questions now. In 20, Debt-Free Dad says, in 2020, I had a ruptured brain aneurysm
Mm.
on my wife's birthday. The only thing I thought about in the ICU was my insurance policies and assets. I did not think about passing, death, or surgery.
Mm.
Wow. I'm glad you're all right,
Yeah.
Debt-Free Dad.
Yeah, that I'm glad you're all right, and that is certainly an experience. So, and I can understand why. Again, thinking about the statement I made, when I think about, when I look in my children's eyes, I'm just I'm trying to do as much as possible to ensure that the only thing that they might do is just mourn my passing, right? That they have to do, right? Is just mourn my passing. I don't want to burden them with anything beyond that. Then it would have made my living a little bit less so.
Yes, this is our Paula with a crazy sense of humor. Maybe she woke up and made the transfer. Yes, Glenmore girl.
Little girl. Okay, good.
I've been here forever. I was born in Manchester and raised in Clarendon.
I understand.
We're all family here, man. We're all family here.
I
All right,
understand.
we're gonna take a little 2 minute commercial break and come back, and Attorney Marlon is gonna give us all of his contact information and where we can you know, get more information from him. So bear with us a second, guys. And we'll also share his website as well. So just bear with me a little bit so we can get this little commercial advertisement for you, because we are promoting our event, and we want to make sure that our sponsors are being shown. So stay right there, guys. If you have any final questions, just drop them in. Alrighty. Yes, indeed, guys. Yes, indeed. Remember, we do have the event coming up on October 15th. It's the Retire Ready live experience, and you saw all of the sponsors. They're going to be there. They're going to be some of them are going to be there. Some of them are just sponsoring the event, but you'll get a chance to interact with those that are there on the day. Now, Mr. Attorney Marlon Brammer, tell us a little bit about your own practice and how, the workshops that you do, and so forth.
So
So
I
I
practice in
practice in
the
the
areas
areas
of,
of
I'm
I'm
getting a
getting a
little
little
bit of
bit of
feedback.
feedback.
Oh, let me get this down. It's probably that. Okay, continue.
Okay, I practice in the areas of estate planning, business planning, and real estate. And I find that these three areas correlate with each other in many ways, and I serve clients effectively in those ways. So I do a little bit of probate as well as real estate closings and wealth planning and wealth management for some of my clients. Now, with regard to the services that we provide, we do several. I have an ongoing webinar that we hopefully you see it on Facebook if you're in the area. You probably should be or would be targeted for that specific webinar. We also do seminars, live seminars, where we actually partner with other financial services companies as well as other partners in the community to have these live seminars. In fact, we have one coming up on October 26th, right? And it's going to be in Boca Raton. Our office is in Boca Raton, and we try to reach out to the community as much as possible. We do speaking engagements, podcast hosting, and so on and so forth. We are in the process of developing our own podcast as well. It's called Faithful Wealth, and we actually have a Faithful Wealth community. If you're interested in learning more about that, I can drop you the link, and you can certainly join the Faithful Wealth community. There we talk about everything, obviously, that we're talking about here, and how to really create wealth, get out of debt, and create income and create cash flow businesses. And that's kind of my mantra, my forte.
Excellent, excellent. You do quite a lot of different things. do a lot of things. And where can people get hold of you?
Right. So that is a website. That's brammerfirm.com, BRAMERFIRM.com. And if you hit on the contact section on the top, you can see our contact information there. Our number is 561 295 9110, and our email is there as well, info@brammerfirm.com.
So here is the email, info@brammerfirm.com. The phone number right there is 561 295 9110, and the location is in Boca Raton. So you can just go to the website is brammerfirm.com to access his information. All of the information is right there. Okay, awesome. I think it's this sharing seems to be giving me issues there. Let's get rid of that. All right. So any other final? Oh, we've got a what do you call it? We've got
a bot.
A bot in here messing things up for me. That's not very nice. So, and I don't have any what do you call it, moderators right now, so I'm going to have to leave that alone right now. So Daniel had one more thing to say. Let's see. Thanks very much. What is the real power of a trust internationally? I just would like to know if a normal court has jurisdiction over a trustee's decision. I don't know if you can give that information in the for international.
Sure. So I deal with clients who have properties internationally, Israel, Europe, the Caribbean, and they want to try to put those assets in their trust that they created in Florida, and you can absolutely do that, depending on the jurisdiction that you're going to. Usually, they're comedy laws that would COMITY, not COMEDY, comity laws that would ensure that the document that you created here would be respected in that jurisdiction. You just have to make sure that you go through the necessary steps to validate the transaction and transfer the asset over to your trust. So in the case of Jamaica, we have law firms that we work with in Jamaica, as well as in other Caribbean countries, that would ensure that if you had property, let's say in Jamaica, and you created a trust here, and you wanted it to be placed in this specific trust, you can certainly go ahead and do so. Just partner with that attorney that we refer you to, and they'll ensure that the asset is transferred into the trust. And it's the same with Great Britain. We have our people there that actually have assets, and they've transferred the assets to the trust. Now, I think I'm answering your question. So there's a difference between having a trust here and have it being respected in an international jurisdiction, or having an international trust, right, outside of the United States that would do a certain thing to try to avoid certain taxes within the United States. So I think I addressed the former and not the latter, because I think that's what you're asking.
All right. Hopefully he has the information that he needs. All right. So, Attorney Marlon Brammer, I thank you so much for giving us extra time tonight and all of the questions answered. We really appreciate having the professional experience of someone like yourself, and the fact that you're right here in the community, that makes a big difference to us. I'm sure we're going to meet in person one of these days. So.
Yes, absolutely. I look forward to it, and I thank you so much for having me here. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I love the music, and next time I'll come a little bit dressed down so we can boogie.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to let you go, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
All right, thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, guys, that is the show for tonight. We are going to just finish off with just make sure that I show you my my VIPs one more time, and then let us get out of here for tonight. So let's So remember, we have the big event happening on October 15th, which is only about less than about 3 weeks now. 1, 2, 3, 4, just less about 3.5 weeks now to go. So I'm so excited about that. I want to thank each and every person that was here tonight. If you're still awake, Gary Dixon, Victor Morgan, Oral Ferguson. Oral Ferguson's going to be giving a painting. He does pictures, cut glass pictures. He's one of our sponsors as well. He's going to be giving us one of his beautiful paintings and pictures on the event. Mrs. B. Finesse. Shout out to Jackie Adamson. Also to Paula Scott, the humorous Paula Scott. And also, I'm listening. Debt-Free Dad. Debt-Free Dad, you still with us, Debt-Free Dad? I'm so happy to have you with us. Another YouTuber. So good to have you. Let's see who else. I'm listening. Do you have a YouTube channel as well? I'm listening. Faye Holder Welsh, thank you so much for your questions and your interactivity and for staying up so late as well. Veronica Flowers from MSE Network. That's it. Now I finally remember. MSE Network. Good to have you, Veronica. Who else do we have here tonight? Let's see. Tina Azal. I didn't even give you a shout out earlier. Tina Azal, thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope you can make the live event, Tina. I hope you'll be there. I'm sure you will. Danielle Lewis Limited in the UK. Thanks for joining us tonight. Staying up late. Thank you so much. And also, who else? That's it, guys. So thank you so much for joining us. I love this message. Great show, MJ. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, MJ, and guest attorney Marlon Brammer. Thank you so much, Faye. Good to have you again. Back to sleep for me, 2:30 a.m. BST. Good night to you, and good evening for everybody else. All right, guys. So as we normally do, just a little bit more music before we say our final good nights. Just a little bit more music. You can't have too much music, right? You can't have too much music. Let's go. Alright guys, good night. Good to see you all. Good to have you all with us tonight. We are saying good night. Wasn't that good? Wasn't that a great show, guys, with attorney Marlon Brammer? Amazing information. Wow. Amazing. Thank you, Jackie. I appreciate you. Thank you. So I think I'm going to do another show before Thursday. I owe you a show on the 401k. The 401ks. I'm going to talk about that. Maybe Tuesday I might come along and do a extra show. Yeah, lots of good things happening, guys. Feel free to let me know if you have anything extra you want to see. Thanks, Daniel. Good night. guys. Bye. See you next time.